And we're rolling. I'll be introducing the new meal plan for the paid subscribers on the Real Meal Revolution subscription site, and from the meal plan I'll be teaching you 3 recipes. We've got green curry, pork fillet stir fry, roasted blue cheese and sage squash, and my favorite Trinchado recipe from the restaurant industry. This week's meal plan is called A Winning Week by Jonno, and it's based on how I live a week of low carb. I hate eating breakfast, so I usually skip it. I just have a coffee, I have a very light snacky lunch, and then I like to cook very easy like pan stews and that kind of thing for supper. So the 3 recipes I'm going to show you from that meal plan this week are the green curry pork stir fry, the Trinchado, which comes from my restaurant days almost 10 years ago, and then a really easy vegetarian dish, which is blue cheese and sage roasted gem squash. First thing we're going to do is get the sauteed veg ready, because the key to this dish is making sure the meat doesn't overcook in the last step. Okay, now I'm going to cut my courgettes, and what you'll see me doing is exactly the same with the onions. I'm going to cut my courgettes and my onions to roughly the same size as the pieces of peppers, because it looks nice when everything's cut the same size, but it also makes it easier to eat if everything sort of sits together the same size in the spoon or fork or whatever you're eating it with. Another thing to consider is how long each of these veggies takes to cook. So if you're cutting courgettes and peppers to the same size, they should cook for roughly the same amount of time, so you don't get one thing raw and one thing overcooked. And there you can see roughly, they're all roughly the same size, so they'll go nicely in the pan together. Okay, so I'm going to chuck in my onions first, just to soften them up a little bit. And this isn't in the recipe, but you can add this in. I'm actually going to throw in a smashed garlic clove, whole. And the beauty of putting this in whole is that you'll get the edges caramelized, but the inside will be nice and soft. And if whoever's eating it doesn't like garlic, they can pick it out. And you can see that butter's burnt ever so slightly to give it a bit of a nutty flavor. Okay, these have softened ever so slightly, and I can smell the garlic, so I'm adding in the rest of the ingredients. And this pan has to stay hot, and you have to keep hearing the sizzle, because the sizzle means it's caramelizing and not boiling. And the last thing we want to do is boil this stuff. Okay, now while this is sauteing away, I'm going to get my prep together for the Trinchado. So first, you're going to cut this nice piece of rump into some big squares. Remember, if the squares are too small, you won't be able to get caramelization on the outside without them cooking through. And I like this medium rare. So if you like well done, then it doesn't matter how big you cut them. So pop that in a bowl, give it a liberal sprinkling of salt, some pepper, and then I'm not going to put oil in the pan. Instead, I'm actually going to oil the meat for this one. Give them a good mix. So the sauteed veg is nice and caramelized. You can see the courgettes are cooked through. And instead of salt, I'm actually just going to season these with a few capers, and I'm just going to throw them in whole, and I'm going to use some of this juice as well, because the juice is a salty brine, and it's going to kind of season the veggies. And remember, these don't need that much flavor because they're going with the Trinchado, which is going to add a lot of extra flavor. I'm going to put the Trinchado pan straight on the heat. This pan is now ferociously hot, and what I'm going to do is add the meat in, and instead of tossing it as I go, I'm going to actually gently lay them in so that I can get some good color on each side. And the pan has to be this hot for you to get color without cooking it through. I'm just adding another clove of garlic here. I'm actually using a chili and garlic paste, which is what the recipe calls for, but I like a little extra garlic. Okay, so we should have some color here. Got some good caramelization. Okay, so we've got some good caramelization here. I'm just going to take them out straight away and tip them straight back into the bowl before they overcook. And I'm not going to wash this pan. I want the beef that's stuck on the bottom of this pan to lift into the sauce. Putting it straight back on the heat and adding the onions. And the onions are going to release some water and they're going to help lift up all that sediment. You can see they've gone brown quite quickly already. And these onions might look like they're burning, but they're brown because they've actually helped lift all the beef off the bottom of the pan. So that's where you're going to get your beautiful roasted flavor from. Okay, it's time to add the garlic. Give that a little stir. And then I've got some chili and garlic paste here. I'm going to like it quite spicy, so I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons. And then just going to give that a little bit of a roast. Let it get some color. And what happens is when you roast this off at the bottom of the pan, caramelizes a bit and brings out a little bit of the natural sweetness. Okay, so some beef stock, juice of lemon. You can do this to taste if you don't like it too sour. I like quite a lot of acidity. Olives, some smoked paprika. And now we're just going to let that boil until it's reduced and almost thick before we add the beef back in. Oh, that's fiery. We're going to finish this off with some flat leaf parsley. I'm going to pick most of the stalks out, but I'll leave a few in just for a little bit of crunch. It doesn't need to be super fine. We want that rustic Portuguese look. So that's about as thick as it's going to get without adding any other unnatural thickeners. I'm just going to tip the meat back in along with all those juices and warm it through. Okay, this meat's perfectly cooked. Finish it off with a nice big handful of fresh chopped parsley. You're just not going to see me eating my food and telling you how delicious it is. You want to try it? Make it yourself. So I'm going to show you how to make a green curry pork fillet stir fry. Now, pork fillet is one of these ingredients a lot of people are quite nervous about cooking. It can be quite intimidating because it dries out quite quickly if you cook the whole fillet. But with this recipe, if you slice it thin enough, it actually goes nice and tender in the sauce, and even a novice can overcook it and it'll still be nice and tender. So we're going to kick off by making the green curry sauce. Just going to pour in some coconut milk, and we're basically going to make the Thai curry sauce in advance. So we're going to add in curry paste, a little bit of fish sauce. This is what we add instead of salt when we're making Thai food. And then to add the acidity, we always use fresh lime juice instead of lemons or whatever else you would use. And add a little bit of chicken stock and some garlic. Now it says here finely chopped garlic. I'm not going to chop the garlic, I'll just grate it. Okay, and then I'm going to put about a handful of coriander and a handful of basil in there. Now with the Thai curry, these stalks, they kind of add a little bit of texture, so I'm going to keep the leaves and the stalks separate just because I want to chop the stalks slightly more finely. But they almost act as like an additional ingredient. So I'm going to stir fry those when I add in the spring onions and peppers. Now these, I'm just going to chop roughly. I call this running my knife through. So you can see there are some bits that are whole. I'm just going to add great color and a little bit of texture. This whole sauce goes in right at the end, and basically as it heats up, it's going to heat up those herbs and release all the flavor into the sauce. So we just give it a little mix. Check the seasoning. You always want to get a nice balance of salty and sour, and that's perfect. Stalks, peppers, Marsh 2. And the easiest way to get Marsh 2 nice and julienne is to stack them on top. Cut them into 4 lengthways. Sprouts. Okay, so I've done all my chopping, and now I'm going to cut the fillet. If you cut the fillet first, obviously you have to go and wash the board. I'm just going to cut this as thin as I can. And it doesn't have to be super neat. It's all going to go into the sauce. Okay, so we're going to get this pan stinking hot. Or down until they've wilted enough, but I still want to keep that crunch. And the moment they hit that spot where they're slightly wilting but still crunchy, we're going to add in the sauce and the meat, bring it to the boil and serve it straight away. And then just pour in your sauce. You can see all those flavors boiling together nicely. Give it a little stir. And before everything wilts too much, add the meat back in. Stir it around. The last thing before we serve it, check that seasoning. Wait to the top there. Give it a bit of a shine. I'm about to show you how to make one of my favorite recipes, blue cheese and sage roasted gem squash. So first up, you've got to boil the gem squash. Cut them in half, pop them into boiling water and leave them there for about 15 minutes. Before you do anything, preheat your oven to 200. Okay, now you're going to get a spoon and scoop out the seeds and chuck them away. So now I'm going to crumble the blue cheese into the squash, and you could use Stilton or Gorgonzola or Roquefort. It's up to you, whichever you enjoy the most or whichever is easier to get hold of. You have to like blue cheese if you're choosing to do this recipe. Now you can put it into the oven just like this and it would still be good. But the next step sort of takes it to the next level. So we're going to make this nutty butter I was telling you about. Hashtag nutty butter. So this butter will basically melt and bubble and eventually it'll turn nutty brown. And that's the milk solids actually toasting in the fat. And as that happens, we need to drop our sage in. And what you'll get is this beautiful crispy deep fried sage, but the butter will take on the flavor of the sage as well. Okay, you can see it's gone nutty brown. And you immediately take that off the heat so that it stops cooking. Now you just spoon this over. Make sure you get a little bit of sage on each squash, lots of butter. And then we just spoon the rest of this nutty butter over, and maybe just pour that over, just in case. Give it a little bit of salt and pepper. Someone pass my phone so I can snap this.
I just really enjoy how you said spoon this nutty butter. It just sounds so rude. Spooning this nutty butter.
Little nuggets.
And then pop it under the grill until the cheese is melted. Okay. Now this recipe we invented in about 30 seconds when we were shooting the original Real Meal Revolution. We had just shot this chicken dish and we all decided we actually hated it and we needed to fill the space in the book. So we opened the fridge and there were a whole lot of ingredients left over from the previous book that they had shot at the studio. So we just pulled out some gem squash and some blue cheese and we put them together, and then we thought, oh, how can we make this slightly better? And we made a sage noisette. Okay, so you could do this yourself when you're sitting with it on your plate, or you can do this for your guests. But the best thing to do is to actually dig in and mix the cheese with the squash as it comes out the oven. But honestly, it's like the best gem squash you'll ever eat. I don't think there are actually better gem squashes out there.
I can believe it.
You should just stop there. You killed it. that's that. Thank you so much for watching the show. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week. All the information you need is in the information section, links, downloads. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. They're both at Real Meal Revolution. And then please leave comments, feedback, suggestions in the comment section below. That's it. Thank you again. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.